Today is not just July 24th. It is a moment sealed by heaven long before you even knew your heart would ache like this. Archangel Michael has not arrived with judgment. He has come with clarity. The kind of clarity that does not shatter, it softens. And it whispers to your soul, you were never the problem, but you were always the target. There has been movement in the unseen. Someone who once stood close to you smiled near you. Maybe even prayed beside you was not who they seemed. But this message is not to destroy them. It is to deliver you. A shift has occurred. The storm that once headed toward your home has turned, not because you fought, but because heaven fought for you. Michael saw the moment you swallowed pain to protect peace. He counted the tears you never told anyone about. And now, the silence is ending. What you've been feeling lately, the unease, the pressure, the sense that something unseen is circling. It's not paranoia. It's prophecy being fulfilled. Someone's false light is dimming, the mask is slipping, and soon the truth will not knock gently. It will arrive with clarity so sharp you won't need explanations. You'll just know. But do not fear what's coming. It's not punishment. It's peace reclaiming its space. Breathe. You are not being warned to panic. You are being awakened to heal. There is a reason your heart has been restless. The air around you has carried a weight that isn't yours. A presence once familiar began to shift slowly, quietly, like a shadow moving just out of sight. And while others called it coincidence, your spirit knew better. You weren't confused. You were discerning. Archangel Michael has been standing near not with rage, but with restraint. Because sometimes divine justice waits not to punish, but to allow time for truth to ripen. And now that truth is ripening fast. The one who smiled at your wounds, the one who whispered doubt into your name, the one who tried to stretch your kindness into a rope, they will feel the pull of what they created. But this isn't their story. This is yours. You are not the victim of their lies. You are the evidence that grace can stand in fire and not be consumed. Michael doesn't come to expose for revenge. He comes to reveal so you can release. There will be a moment, a knock, a message, a shift in someone's behavior, and it will confirm everything you already suspected. Not to crush you, but to free you. This isn't the end of peace. It's the removal of what has quietly stolen it. And when the news comes, you won't collapse. You'll feel a strange stillness, a calm that doesn't match the chaos. That is the sign you've already healed more than you realized. Stay present. The revelation is not meant to scare you. It's meant to return your soul to balance. You've been told to move on, to let it go, to be the bigger person. But heaven knows you never held on to the pain. You held on to the questions. Why would someone who claimed to care turn so silent? Why did the one you protected turn out to be the one who needed protection from the truth? Archangel Michael has watched the quiet moments, the ones no one applauded, The nights when you could have lashed out, but instead you whispered prayers. And those whispers, they echoed louder in heaven than any scream ever could. There is someone whose words once made you question your own worth. But God says, their voice will no longer echo in your spirit. Their influence is being revoked not by confrontation, but by cleansing. The energy in your home, your phone, your dreams. It's been trying to shift. You may have felt it in the way you suddenly needed rest, or how your mind wandered to old conversations you thought you forgot. These weren't coincidences. They were spiritual alerts. The person who wounded you might be facing what they sowed. But this isn't about karma. This is about closure. And closure, when it's divine, doesn't need revenge. It just needs release. So if your hands feel tired, it's because they've been holding something that's not yours. Let go. Not to save them, but to save yourself. This is the shift that frees your breath, the kind of release only heaven can orchestrate. You are being realigned, not rejected. Let the clearing make space for what is holy. There is something sacred about not retaliating, something powerful in the restraint of a wounded soul that still chooses to walk in light. You could have exposed them. You could have fought fire with fire, but instead you stayed silent. And heaven took notice. Archangel Michael says, every moment you chose peace instead of pride, you moved closer to divine protection. Now the shift has begun, not in some loud theatrical way, but quietly, deeply, like roots breaking through concrete. The ones who once mocked you may never apologize. They may never acknowledge what they did. But that's not your burden to carry anymore. You were never meant to hold the weight of their conscience. Heaven is preparing something you cannot yet see. Not revenge, not reversal, but restoration. What's been withheld is being returned. Not because you demanded it, but because justice has a rhythm, and your heart has been beating in time with it. Soon you'll hear things. Conversations will surface. Names will be mentioned. Events will unfold. And when they do, you'll know. I was never crazy. I was just ahead of the truth. Don't let the noise pull you back into survival mode. This isn't a storm for you to survive. It's a revelation you've already outgrown. The lie ends here. The weight drops here. The healing begins deeper now. When clarity arrives, don't run. Receive it like light breaking into a locked room. You may have noticed it lately, the room feels heavier. Before you sleep, the dreams more vivid, the silence deeper. That's not anxiety, that's alignment. Archangel Michael has been stationed near, not to alarm you, but to remind your spirit you are not alone in this. For weeks now, heaven has been rearranging the pieces around your life. People have been shifted, doors quietly closed, phone calls missed on purpose. All of it divine. There was someone who used your vulnerability as an entry point. They got too close, not to heal you, but to study your light. But light doesn't just reveal, it defends. And now that light is drawing a line they cannot cross. God saw what you didn't say. The way you blamed yourself for trusting the wrong hands. The way you tried to hold the peace while everything around you pulled at your peace. But let this be clear. You are not losing your mind. You are regaining your voice. The ache you feel right now isn't defeat. It's detachment. Heaven is loosening what you no longer need, even if you once loved it. And when the news comes, because it will, you won't fall apart. You'll pause, you'll inhale, and somewhere deep inside you'll whisper, I knew. I just didn't want it to be true. But knowing is no longer your enemy. It is your entrance into peace. You are being shielded through revelation. Let truth finish what love tried to cover. There is something sacred about the ache you're carrying right now. Not all pain is punishment. Some pain is prophecy. It tells you something is ending, not your worth, not your future, but an illusion that had to fall. Archangel Michael stands in front of your home, not with thunder, but with stillness. Because heaven doesn't always move loud. Sometimes it moves clean. There is someone who once carried your trust like a weapon. They mistook your openness as weakness. They played roles you never auditioned them for. But now, the performance is over. The truth is surfacing not just around them, but within you. You're beginning to see it all differently. The red flags you excused, the gut feelings you ignored, the silent prayers that were always answered just not how you expected. This heartbreak you're bracing for, it's not coming to destroy you. It's coming to disconnect you from the lie. You won't need closure from them. The closure is already forming in the way you breathe deeper now. In the way you no longer flinch at their name. In the way your spirit has stopped reaching for something that never reached back. God is not asking you to fight. He's asking you to receive. And when the moment comes, when the phone rings or the news arrives, you will not be shocked. You will be still. Because heaven already told you, and now your soul believes it. This is not just exposure. This is extraction. What harmed you is being removed for good. There will be a sound, a voice, a message, and it will carry a weight that your heart has already made room for. Not all confirmation feels good at first. Sometimes it stings because deep down you knew. But now the guessing ends, the silence breaks, and with it comes the soft collapse of the version of you that kept pretending it didn't hurt. Archangel Michael whispers, "You are not losing control. You are releasing what never belonged." You may cry, not from weakness, but because the truth, when it finally lands, rearranges your spirit. It makes space. It unbinds. And in that moment you'll begin to understand. The heartbreak isn't the punishment. The lie was, living under its weight, questioning your instincts, doubting your voice. That was the real burden. God says, you don't need to prove how strong you are anymore. Your survival already proved it. So cry if you must, breathe deeper than you ever have, and let the weight slide off like a garment you've outgrown. You are stepping into clarity, into calm, into divine distance from what once drained you. The person who thought they'd hold your peace hostage has no access anymore. Not because they confessed, but because heaven intervened. And when the dust settles, you won't remember the storm. You'll remember the stillness that followed it. This is where the pain makes sense, and the healing feels like home. You didn't survive all of this to stay broken. You didn't walk through betrayal to keep limping through life. And no, you're not being asked to forget, you're being prepared to live without needing answers. Archangel Michael now shifts his posture, no longer just the watcher, but the proctor of a new beginning. Heaven is not just closing a door behind you, it is opening one in front of you, one that was hidden behind everything that had to fall apart. You may still feel echoes of the pain, but echoes are not chains. They fade. They grow quiet as peace grows louder. God has not been silent. He's been speaking through shifts, through delays, through the way your heart no longer fits in old spaces. This is not discomfort. This is growth. You're not being punished. You're being repotted like a plant that outgrew a small container. You were never meant to stay cramped in the soil of someone else's small vision of you. What's ahead is not a replacement, it's a restoration. Not love that performs, but love that protects. Not people who pretend, but people who pray with you. And when that restoration arrives, you will not chase it. It will recognize you. Because you're no longer shaped by survival, you're being defined by sacred stillness. Let the person who left stay gone. Let the one who hid the truth live with it. You're walking into rooms where lies can't follow. Heaven isn't just removing pain, it's replacing it with peace that fits. You're going to feel it soon, not a shiver, but a release. A moment when something in the air shifts and your body knows before your mind can explain. That's not fear, that's freedom stepping in. Archangel Michael has cleared the atmosphere around your name. What once clung to you like smoke is dissolving. Whispers that followed you are being silenced. The tension in your chest. It's not anxiety anymore, it's the space being made for peace. God says, I have not forgotten a single moment you kept quiet when you could have shouted. Not one tear, not one night, not one prayer has gone unnoticed. And now, restoration doesn't just mean receiving something new. It means finally realizing you were never the one who was broken. They made you question your softness. They laughed at your loyalty. They called your kindness naive. But heaven saw it as strength. And now the blessing is not that they come back. It's that you no longer wait for them to. You don't need an apology to move forward. You don't need an audience to heal. You only need permission, and heaven already gave it. So if you feel the tears come again, let them. Not because you're shattered, but because this chapter is closing without regret. The heartbreak that haunted you is now just a memory heaven is rewriting, and where it once bled, it now blooms. You are no longer surviving the past. You're walking in the light of what it taught you. This is not just the end of a painful chapter. This is the birthing place of your authority. The kind that isn't loud but steady. Not the authority to command others, but the strength to no longer need their validation. Archangel Michael stands at the edge of this shift, his sword not drawn to fight, but to cut away what's already expired. The heartbreak was real, but so was the way you kept loving. So was the way you kept waking up. So was the way your soul refused to die. God says, the very thing that was meant to unravel you has become the proof of your becoming. There will be moments ahead when the enemy tries to remind you of what broke, but heaven will remind you of what survived. And what's rising from the ashes isn't just your healing, it's your harvest. You don't owe the past any more explanations. You don't owe the silence another sacrifice. What's coming next won't require pretending. You are now protected not by walls, but by wisdom. You are now guided not by fear, but by discernment. And you are now covered not in shame, but in sacred favor. Let them talk, let them wonder, let them feel the absence of your light. You're walking forward with heaven at your side, and every step will feel lighter. Not because the journey is easier, but because you finally laid down what was never yours to carry. This is not revenge, this is resurrection, and your peace is the proof that heaven moved.